Hello everyone, this is Graeme Anderson from Four Corners of the Board, and today I'm going to be looking at Who Should We Eat? Now I was interested in this game as soon as I had heard about it due to the theme. Now it is a co-op game where your group is stranded on a desert island and has to work together to keep each other sane, build a raft, and make sure you don't starve. But of course, there's not enough food and eventually you will end up having to eat one of the other survivors to make sure the rest of you can live. Now, the person who is eaten will not quietly go away, but will come back as a vengeful ghost who will now work against the group's plans to get off the island. Now, this sounds quirky and definitely not a standard theme, and is played strictly for laughs. But is this game any good? Let's get to the table, see how it's played, then we'll come back for my final thoughts on Who Should We Eat. So here is Who Should We Eat set up for 5 players. The goal of the game is to work together to make sure the group has enough food, keeps their sanity, and builds a raft large enough so you can all sail off the island you are stranded on. Now we have 3 main tracks of the game to manage: the food track, the sanity track, and the build progress track. Each track has a token to show how much of each that you have, and each has a starting position based on the number of players. Each track also has a corresponding deck of cards. They will all have the same back, but the fronts match the colors. Each player is also given 1 character card, which will have 2 sides, and you'll always start on the living side. Each player will also receive a personality card, which will give them a special ability during the game. There are also quest cards, which will be evaluated at the start of each turn, ghost cards for any character that dies during the game, and straws, 9 of which are long, and 1 short for any time the group needs to draw straws. Let's have a quick look at the different cards. The character cards will show your name, how much of each deck of survivor cards you will draw, and how much food you are worth to the group. The survivor cards, they are split in half. The top half is used when the card is used for the play effect, and the bottom is used for the keep effect. Ghost cards will either be instant effects, as shown by this icon here, or effects that will stay with the player called haunts, identified by this icon. And finally, quest cards. They are split into 2 halves as well. The top half will happen immediately, and when the card is given to survivor, that survival will get the bottom half ability, and I'll talk about each of these cards during the gameplay. Each round of the game has either 4 or 5 phases, depending on the situations that arise during the round. The first thing that will happen is the morning phase. If anyone was killed the night before, they will come back as a ghost in the morning. I'll get into the ghost players a bit later. Next, each player will draw a hand of cards based on their survivor cards from the appropriate piles, and you will also pick up any keep cards that you have left in front of you. You will then select 1 card to play during the round, and 1 card to keep for potentially using at the end of the round. Once you've selected, return the rest of the card to the appropriate piles. You will only ever have 1 play and 1 keep card in front of you. Next, we move to the afternoon phase. If there are any ghosts, they will resolve their cards first. Then the leader will pick one of the quest cards, and then the leader will resolve the top half. Then all survivors will draw straws to see who received the quest card, and have the bottom part of the quest card applied to them. Now drawing straws is just as it sounds, and any time during the game you need to draw straws, this is the process you will follow. You will select the number of straws equal to the number of players, making sure that the short straw is selected. 1 player holds them all in their hands, making sure no one can see which is the short straw, and everyone will draw a straw. Now during the quest phase, the survivor who gets the short straw will get the quest card and place it under the survivor card, and now they have a permanent effect. Once the quest is resolved, each player in clockwise order from the leader will resolve their play card. This will usually involve moving the tracks. We then move to the evening phase. You will reduce sanity by 2 and reduce the food track by the number of survivors. If the food track is now below 0, a trial must be held. If it is at or above 0 and sanity is still above 0, you can skip the trial phase and move directly to the final phase of the round. If you need to have a trial because the food track is below 0, the leader will set the rules for the trial, and they can pick whatever rules they wish. They can say everyone talks at once for 30 seconds, or each person gets 1 minute to talk, etc. Once the trial begins, survivors now discuss who they will eat. This is the only time during the game the survivor can use their knife from their kept card. They will turn it over and call out who the intended victim is. If there are multiple people with knives that want to use them, they will also join in the knife fight. Any of the intended victims will also have a chance to reveal a shield from their kept card. Now, if there is only one intended victim and they do not have a shield card, then that victim will automatically die. If there are multiple, then all the people involved in the knife fight, including the people who play their knives, will draw straws. The short straw is the person that will die. You will then add their food to the food track, and if the food track is now 0 or above, you can continue. If it is still below 0, another trial must happen. Whenever a person dies, they're going to turn over their card, and during the morning phase, when players draw cards, they'll be drawing from the ghost deck, and during the afternoon phase, the played ghost cards will always be resolved first. Anyone who is a ghost is now actively working against the remaining survivors. They want to do everything in their power to thwart their survivors and stop them from leaving. They can even participate in the end of day trials. Now, the very last phase of the game, if there are no trials, you will check for a victory condition. If the build track is at or above the target raft goal, which is based on the number of remaining survivors, the game ends and the survivors win. If there was at least one knife fight, or the victory conditions were not met, then you start another round. The game will end when one side wins. The survivors win if the build track marker is equal to or above the raft token at the end of the night when no trial took place. And the ghosts will win if the sanity track ever reaches 0 at any point, or a new quest card cannot be drawn, or a trial phase begins with just 2 people. And that's the game. So let's get back to the table to see what I thought about Who Should We Eat? So, what did I think about Who Should We Eat? Well, first off, I did like the components of this game. The art is very cartoony, and I really like the straws that you draw. I don't know what it is about them, I just like the tactile feel of these straws. The game does come with cards that you can use instead of the straws, but I just never used the cards. Now, the survivor cards are easy to read and understand, and really the only difficulty I had with them was the amount of shuffling you had to do when playing with large groups. There just didn't seem to be enough cards that you wouldn't end up having to shuffle the discards back into the deck. We found almost every round, or at least every 2 rounds, and when the game lasts for 8, 9, or 10 rounds, that can get kind of annoying. Now, I did like that there were many of the different character cards and personalities. Now, I showed a few of these during the review, but there are many others, as you can see here, and some of them are more interesting to play than others, but I didn't find any combos that I felt that didn't work. Now, the game is fairly easy to teach, and a lot of the gameplay comes down to the trials. If there are no trials and no ghosts, the game is really not overly interesting. There's no reason not to play the best cards when it's your turn during the day phase. Now, the quests do change up the game from round to round, and there are enough variety of quest cards. I feel the game really starts, though, when you run out of food, which can be fairly quick, and the trials begin. Now, having the leader define how the trials will be held, I understand what they were going for, but in the games I played, once the first trial happens, most of the other people just kind of followed suit with the same rules. Now, the rulebook does say the round leader can decide, and the rest of the group should try and follow the rules, but then it can just end up with a bunch of people talking over each other. Now, the knife fights happen a lot more than I expected, and mainly because of the limited variety of keep cards. Many people just kind of kept knives or shields because that's what they had. So often the trials were stopped before really much happens, and when someone turns over a knife, the trial just stops. Now, there are other people that can turn over the knives and shields if they're a victim. Now, the knife fights also cut out what I felt was the most interesting part of the social aspect of the game. You can just start to try and convince people not to eat you, and someone pulls a knife, trial over. The knife fights themselves are also completely random. You draw straws to see who actually dies. It's not guaranteed to be a victim. It can actually be the person that turned over the knife in the first place. Now, if no knife was pulled, the trial just ends up in a vote on who the group should eat, which can be kind of more satisfying if you're able to convince the other players just how valuable you are to the team, assuming, of course, you survive. Now, being killed and coming back as a ghost player can be fun for a while, but you end up taking the role of just a take-that player. You were just trying to stop the rest of the survivors from winning. And I felt that if you don't win as the game as the ghosts, it's more of you just stopping the survivors from winning. I wish that there was some sort of other track the ghosts could manipulate where they could take an active role to win. Give the ghosts a choice to either hamper the survivors or use cards to manipulate a 4th track. I felt once the novelty of the ghost being wears off, it's not that interesting. You can still chime into the trials, but people tended not to listen to any of the ghost players. Now, overall, I did enjoy my plays of the game. The theme is just quirky enough that it helped people to get into the spirit of the game. But does it replace other social games for me? I'm not sure. When I want a social game, I'm not sure this will be the first one I pull off the shelf. But if I have the right mix of people who are willing to get into the theme and have a good, morbid sense of humor, I think I would recommend this game. Now, if I can just figure out if the title should be Who Should We Eat? Or Whom Should We Eat? Anyway, that's it for the moment, and as always, thanks for watching.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.